If you have your Bibles, and if you'd like to follow along, you can turn to the book of Mark. The book of Mark is where we're going to be spending a lot of our time as we remember Jesus this morning, and we truly stand or sit in the presence amazed by Jesus. As we're going through the Gospels in our Gospels class, I can't help but just be impressed with how the people reacted to Jesus. And as Jesus was teaching, and as Jesus was performing his miracles, and Jesus was casting out demons, I could just imagine those guys sitting there with their eyes wide open after they had just seen something amazing Jesus did, and they all start talking about it. Could you believe what we just saw? Do you believe that he just did that? This guy is amazing. But as I look at that and look at how they would have been amazed by this carpenter's son who happened to live in Nazareth, that we have so many more reasons to stand in the presence amazed by Jesus. And so what we're going to do this morning as we remember Jesus is we're going to look at several occasions where people in the New Testament were amazed or astonished at what Jesus was doing and teaching. And then we'll just look at a couple points on why we should, when we study the Bible and we think about Jesus, should be even more amazed than they were. So we're in Mark chapter 1, and this is where the amazement really starts, and it builds throughout his entire ministry. He's in Capernaum, he's in a synagogue, and he's teaching in the synagogue. So Mark chapter 1 and verse 22 says this, "And they were astonished at his teaching, for he taught them as one having authority and not as the scribes." Well, what happens next is there's a man with a demon, and he stands up and recognizes that Jesus is the Son of God, and he yells out with a loud voice. Jesus casts that demon out. That demon convulses the man, shrieks, leaves the man, and everybody is looking at the man that has been healed, looking at Jesus, looking at the man, looking at Jesus, and they're amazed. So I want to drop down to verse 27. "And they were all amazed, so that they questioned among themselves, 'What is this? What new doctrine is this? For with authority he commands even the unclean spirits, and they obey him.' And immediately his fame spread throughout all the region and Galilee." So this amazement wasn't something that they just kept to themselves. When they were amazed by what they saw Jesus do and what they heard him teach, what did they do with that message? They went out and told it to as many people as they could. "You can't believe what I just saw. You can't believe what I just saw this carpenter's son do from Galilee." And that news spread, so his fame kept going over and over and over, getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So you just drop down to Mark chapter 2 and verse 12, and you're going to find something else. After he heals the man who has been paralyzed, lowered down through the roof, he's forgiven the sins of this particular man. In Mark 2 and verse 12 it says, "Immediately he arose, took up the bed, and went out in the presence of them all, so that they were amazed and glorified God, saying this, 'We never saw anything like this.'" In our study, I've sort of been surprised again by how often that kind of a statement is made. We've never seen anything like this before. Jesus was different in his teaching and his actions, and because of that, the people were amazed by him. And then in Mark chapter 5, you find out that the man who was possessed by the legion of demons, when all those demons are cast out, he wants to go with Jesus. Jesus says, "No, you can't go. You need to stay here and go tell all of your family and friends what God has done for you." When he goes out and tells all of his family and friends what God has done for him, what did they do? They marveled. So it wasn't just the people who saw Jesus do these incredible things. It was the people who didn't see them but heard about them. And that should bring back into our minds what Jesus said to Thomas when he says, "You believe because you see. Blessed are those who don't see, and yet they still believe." And that would be us. We hear about these miracles, we believe these miracles, and we are amazed and we marvel at Jesus. And it also should light a little bit of a fire under us to understand that the telling of the stories of Jesus, still today, they have the power to cause people to be amazed and marveled. marvel. So even though people don't see these miracles anymore, when they hear about this, they can still be touched by what Jesus did in a very special way. In Mark chapter 6 and verse 2, Mark chapter 6 and verse 2, and when the Sabbath had come, he began to teach in the synagogue, and many hearing him were astonished, saying, "Where did this man get these things? And what wisdom is this that is given to him, that such mighty works are performed by his hands?" So they're amazed by two things. Where did the guy get all this wisdom? Why is he so smart? He's just the carpenter's son from Nazareth. And they were amazed by that. And we'll look at how we should be even more amazed by that in just a moment. When Jesus caused all the wind to cease, it says they were greatly amazed in Mark chapter 6 and verse 51 after he walked on the water. They're greatly amazed in themselves beyond measure and marveled. I love that phrase. It's like I can't tell you how amazed these people really were. I can't give you enough descriptions. They were greatly amazed in themselves beyond measure. You can't even measure how amazed they were. And then it says, and then as a result of it, they just sat there marveled at what they had just experienced with Jesus. Remember, our perspectives are so different. We know a lot more now than they knew. This is a man, and they're trying to figure out who he is. They really are trying to figure out who he is. They can do all of these amazing things. In Mark chapter 7, in verse 50 and verse 35, Mark chapter 7 and verse 35, he healed a man that could not speak and could not hear. He started talking, and in verse 36, then he commanded them that they should tell no one, but the more he commanded them, the more widely they proclaimed it, and they were astonished beyond measure, saying, "He has done all things well. He makes both the deaf to hear and the mute to speak." And I hope that, just because we're going to look at a couple more, that I hope I'm building just an incredible case of just how amazed they were all the time with Jesus. And how that same amazement should be. We should stand amazed in the presence of Jesus Christ every single day. Especially on Sundays when we come here to remember his death, we should literally be sitting here with our mouths wide open thinking, wow, I can't believe he actually did that. I can't believe he actually loves us this much. And I can't believe just how smart he was to give us a memorial that we can take every single first day of the week. In Mark chapter 10, we find out that they were amazed at the challenging nature of his teaching. So they talk about how hard it is for a rich man to get to heaven. They're like, well, if it's that hard for a rich man to get to heaven, who can be saved? And he taught incredibly difficult things about marriage and divorce and remarriage. And they were like, well, it's better if a man doesn't even get married if that's the case. So they were amazed by how Jesus challenged their thinking and how his teaching was going to change their life completely. In Mark chapter 10 verse 32, he's heading to Jerusalem to his death. Imagine this. Imagine being one of his followers, knowing what he says was ahead of him, following him. I cannot believe he's going to Jerusalem right now. I can't believe he's going to go head to head with the Jewish leaders. I can't believe he's going there knowing that they're going to hand him over to Pilate and the Romans. It says they were amazed and afraid. Wouldn't you be? As you follow Jesus to Jerusalem? I think I would be amazed and afraid at the same time. In Mark 11 and verse 18, it says, the scribes and the chief priests heard it and sought how they might destroy him, for they feared him, because all the people were astonished at what? His teaching. Jesus performed amazing miracles. But his teaching was equally amazing. And that is amazing in and of itself. That the teaching didn't get lost in all these amazing miracles. That when everything settled down and there were no more miracles that were happening, what rose to the top and what exists even to this very day? The incredible teaching that he gave. The same teaching that amazed them amazes us today. In Mark chapter 12, verse 17, as he's dealing with these people who think they're so amazing, and they come to him and they are challenging him with, are you supposed to pay taxes or not? And he says, let me see a coin. Render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's and God. And he's like, that guy's amazing. How does he do this? How does he turn everything around and make the truth look so simple? You ever been amazed by an intelligent person who could make the truth appear simple? That's what Jesus did. He was able to take all the stuff that the people had confused and made so complicated and bring it down to let your yes be yes and your no, no. I can wrap my arms around that. That makes sense instead of all these little different oaths that they were taking, and some you had to keep and some you didn't have to keep. The simplicity of his teaching should still amaze us today. And it's so amazing to me that Jesus could even cause people to marvel by not saying a word. He knew exactly what to do. Pilate's trying to get him to talk, right? And he's just being quiet, not saying a word. And it says Pilate marveled at that. And then Jesus could even die so quickly people could marvel. He died on the cross so fast that when it was told Pilate he was dead, what did it say? Pilate marveled. How could that guy be dead already? Because he chose when he was going to die. We talked about that recently. So let's just shift our attention for a few moments to give us some more to think about as we actually pass the cup and the bread around, and how marvelous Jesus really is and how we should be amazed. Let's talk about his teaching first. When they heard the teaching of Jesus, they could be amazed and they could marvel at the potential of that teaching being implemented in people's lives. I mean, that's really what they could do. Wow, could you imagine if people actually did this? Could you imagine if we all actually lived this way? What society would be like? What life would be like? Do you realize how his teaching would change us from the inside out if we were to follow it? And many of them started doing that. What do we have? We have 2,000 years of being able to observe what happens when people turn their lives over to Jesus and his teaching, and how much better that makes people and how much better that makes societies. So we can look back not just saying there's potential in this teaching, we can look and say there's more than potential. There is actually great benefit in living out the principles that Jesus taught while he was on this earth. But it's not just that we have 2,000 years of history to be amazed by the teaching of Jesus. We have a room full of people today, here, right now, that we come together with on the first day of the week to remember the man, the God who taught all those things, and we can look in one another's eyes and we can say, boy, that teaching was so important, it turned selfish people into generous people. It turned angry people into happy people. It gave impatient people patience. Look at the power of the teaching of Jesus Christ when we look at the lives of the people that we come in contact with every single day. That should amaze us more than, hey, that would really work if people actually applied it. We've seen it. And not only have we seen it in the lives of everyone else, those of us who have been washed in the blood of Jesus Christ, and although we never will live it perfectly, as we've implemented the teaching of Jesus Christ in our own life, we've seen changes and growth in who we are. So we stand amazed this morning in the presence of Jesus from Nazarene, who gave us the most remarkable teaching anybody has ever given, and we've implemented it in our lives, and we're blessed because of it. So when we remember Jesus, let's remember that. But it's not only that we have seen these teachings in practice instead of just the potential of this teaching. Another very important difference and why we should be even more amazed than they were amazed, because they saw a carpenter's son dirty. They saw a carpenter's son hungry. They saw a carpenter's son bearing the marks on his physical body, being tired and weary and all that stuff. When we look at the story, what do we see? We see God's Son who took on a physical body and agreed to be hungry, and agreed to be thirsty, and agreed to be sleepy, and agreed to have all the infirmities that the body provides us. And when we look at him, we can be even more amazed than they could be at seeing a carpenter's son tired, to sleep on a boat. What we see is we see God's Son coming down from heaven and taking on a body and bearing that body just like we have to. We stand amazed in the presence of Jesus the Nazarene. But then, they were amazed by Jesus, but they only knew verse 1 of that song. They only knew verse 1 of the song. They didn't realize where all this was leading. For the most part, he was performing miracles, he was teaching. They didn't realize it was his plan to go to a cross or to spend the night in a garden with grief and anguish praying for the people. They didn't know that he was going to die for them. As they saw him calm the sea or cast out a demon, they didn't realize he was going to be hanging on a tree one day, dying for the sins of the world. So verse 2, for me it was in the garden, he prayed, not my will be done. He cried with tears in his sorrow, and sweat drops of blood for mine. They didn't know that, we do. He took my sins and my sorrows. He made them his very own. He bore the burden to Calvary and suffered and died alone. They didn't know he was going to do that. We do. So we should stand amazed in the presence of Jesus. And with the ransom and glory, his face I at last shall see. 'Twill be my joy through the ages to sing of his love for me. So this morning, let's continue to be amazed in the presence of Jesus the Nazarene.